Balance of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power alongside Amara Amokwe. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight in Washington, deeply disturbed. One lawmaker's reaction after seeing video of the so-called second strike that killed 2 survivors of an alleged drug boat. The Navy Admiral who gave the orders now telling Congress his account of what did and what did not happen. We'll have a live report coming up. Also tonight, captured. A 5-year-old D.C. mystery is solved as the FBI says it now has the man who planted 2 pipe bombs the day before the January 6 riots. How they cracked the case coming up. Also, a live interview tonight with the mayor of St. Paul, where ICE agents are on the move right now after President Trump's harsh words describing the state of Minnesota as a hellhole and labeling an immigrant community as, quote, garbage. Also, Ballroom Blitz breaking tonight. Trump's handpicked architect heading the East Wing project has been replaced. But we begin this evening with a search for answers. Navy Admiral Frank Bradley briefing lawmakers from both chambers behind closed doors about the U.S. strikes on alleged drug boats outside Venezuela and what exactly happened September 2nd when he ordered the so-called double strike, the double tap on a vessel leaving the country, killing 2 survivors who were in the water. This as top lawmakers react for the first time to video of the incident with mixed views. It's a video President Trump says he's open to releasing to the public. And we start tonight with Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse reporting live from the White House North Lawn. Skylar, what can you tell us?
Good evening, Joe. The president is standing firm behind Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and this comes at a time where controversy is swirling. Calls are being announced for him to step down, but the president is continuing to support the secretary. He, has said yesterday that he would be open to releasing that strike video. And this comes at a time where the administration is really looking to shift the conversation away from what's happening in Venezuela and their handling. They want to talk about affordability. Today, the president was signing peace deals with Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, this is at a time where, look, they're getting a lot of pressure. The pressure is coming down right now in terms of what's happening in Venezuela and their plans in terms of how they're handling these strikes. And it's raising a lot of questions, and soon a lot of answers will have to be accounted for.
Skylar, we also understand that there are new developments with President Trump's plan to build a White House ballroom. What is the latest?
Absolutely, yeah. So what we're learning tonight is that the president has tapped a new D.C.-based architecture firm to take over the lead design on his the $300 million ballroom project that is happening over just behind my shoulder, really, if you can see. With the East Wing, and this is just sort of the next step as the president looks to sort of make his mark here in Washington and even more specifically here at the White House as he really leans into these new renovations.
All right, Skylar, thank you so much. Skylar Woodhouse with us live from the White House as we turn back now to lawmakers' briefing that we talked about by Admiral Bradley, who said specifically there was no kill them all order, as had been reported about the second strike on the boat. But he briefed lawmakers on what took place. They saw the video, and joining us now with his insights is Leon Panetta, of course, the former defense secretary in the Obama administration, who also served as CIA director. And he's the former White House chief of staff to President Clinton, of course, a former congressman as well. It's great to have you back, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining us here on Balance of Power. You, of course, have been watching this along with the rest of us and the saga involving Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. As someone who actually held that job, do you believe the allegations that he would have sought to murder 2 people who were left in the ocean following the initial strike?
Well, I believe it's a serious enough charge that it does need to be thoroughly investigated. And I'm glad that the Committee on Armed Services, both in the House and the Senate, are going to conduct a full investigation, because I really do think that there are a lot of questions here that need answering. And it's going to require a full effort by the Congress with the ability to look at sensitive information, to look at all of the discussion that occurred during the time of the strike, and to really determine exactly what happened here. I think it does have to take place in order to confirm that that this action was credible.
Yeah, there's reporting today in the Wall Street Journal that contingency plans had been approved by Pete Hegseth in the event that something like this happened, what to do if the initial strike left survivors. The military, as we understand, would attempt to rescue survivors who appeared to be helpless or shipwrecked, but it would try to kill them if they took what the U.S. deemed to be hostile action. In this case, Secretary, we saw one or two of these individuals trying to communicate, they said, with suspected cartel members. Is radioing in a call for help considered a hostile action?
Well, I don't think it would have been considered hostile when I was Secretary of Defense. It was basically a communication. You had two people in the water. They were obviously injured. Hard to comment without looking at the tape itself, but there were members who were obviously disturbed by what they saw on the tape. And it's, it's a stretch to say that two individuals who were in the water obviously were part of the initial attack and had to be wounded, I would assume, that they somehow represent a threat to our forces. I think that's a stretch. And that really does need to be looked at, because it's pretty clear from the law that when you have two individuals that don't represent any kind of threat to our forces, that it would be a war crime to, in fact, kill them.
Secretary, you have several members of Congress calling for the full release of the footage from the September 2nd boat strike. Could you help us understand what would we be looking to see on that footage to help us answer some of the questions that surround these strikes?
Well, normally, when I was Secretary and we conducted any kind of military strike, there would be a tremendous amount of preparations in order to prepare for that. What forces are going to be moved, which are going to be deployed, which ones are going to be used, how are we going to go after the target, what are the contingencies that might be involved here. So there should be a lot of backup material that the Congress can look at in terms of how they prepared for the strike and what contingencies they consider. In addition to that, obviously the tapes of the strike itself, both the initial strike and the follow-up strike, are obviously available. I think they need to be looked at closely in order to determine just exactly what was the state of the two individuals in the water. So there are a lot of questions here that need to be answered, because, look, this is a military action. The United States military always operates by the law, and it should. And we're proud of a military that abides by the law and that takes steps to make sure that we don't put their lives at risk. All of that needs to be looked at here to determine just exactly what kind of preparation went into this operation.
Secretary, Defense Secretary Hegseth is weathering scrutiny on multiple fronts. The White House seems to continue to support him. Seems like several Republicans in Congress continue to support him. Do you think that he should remain on the job?
Well, I think it's an issue for those who are conducting the investigation and who are involved in the committee that oversees the Pentagon to be able to determine whether he bears responsibility here for what happened. Look, I believe that when an operation like this is put into action, that in fact the Secretary of Defense, rather than trying to avoid responsibility, should accept responsibility for what happened, whatever. My view has always been that those are orders that come from the Secretary of Defense and the President, usually, and that therefore both the President and the Secretary have to accept some responsibility for what happened.
Does it tell us anything, Mr. Secretary, that we've started, in fact, helping survivors go home? We saw that after the initial strike, after these two were killed. We actually helped to rescue others and sent them back to their countries of origin. Does that tell us anything about what the Pentagon or the administration think about those first killings?
Well, my logical assumption would be that they learned the lesson from the first strike, and that rather than killing the individuals, it makes more sense to be able to go in and try to rescue those who are harmed, and do what they did following that particular strike. So again, I think that is an indication that there are questions about just exactly what were the orders here that were issued. How clear was that? I'm a little concerned, frankly, that the Secretary of Defense, for whatever reason, did not stick around for the second strike, because when you've developed all of the preparations for proceeding with that kind of strike, you would think that the Secretary would be there for the entire operation to make sure that everything was happening according to his directions. So, I understand what the Admiral's saying. I assume we'll have access to his testimony at some point. But I still believe that the primary responsibility rests with the Secretary of Defense.
It's pretty remarkable reporting about not Admiral Bradley, who commanded this operation, but Admiral Halsey, the former head of Southcom. With new reporting, we thought he had resigned based on earlier reports, Secretary, in some sort of opposition to the operation happening off of Venezuela. Wall Street Journal says now Pete Hegseth forced a four-star general out because he voiced concerns about the legality of these strikes. To what extent is this significant to have a commander during an ongoing military operation be taken off the job?
Well, it's very significant because, I have tremendous respect for our commanders, both our admirals and our generals in military uniform. They have experience. They have combat experience. They have respect for the rule of law. They have respect for discipline. They are people who tell it like it is. And I always have respected that in the commanders that I dealt with, is honesty from them. And it's obvious that this admiral was concerned about these operations. After all, there are questions here. We understand this is narco-trafficking, but narco-trafficking is a crime. It's not a military threat to the United States of America. And so to then implement that rationale that somehow this constitutes a direct threat at the United States is pushing it. And it probably raised some serious legal concerns about whether these actions were legal or not. But what also bothers me is that when a commander expresses his concerns to the Secretary of Defense, that the Secretary of Defense ought to take that kind of advice, respect the fact that the officer had the credibility to speak truthfully to the Secretary. It shouldn't be a basis for dismissal, very frankly. It should be a basis for hopefully further trust.
Liam Panetta, former Secretary of Defense, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good to be with you.
Let's turn now to power moves. Stocks rallied today but fell short of all-time highs ahead of next week's Fed decision. We also saw more earnings after the bell today. For more, let's go to Bloomberg's Nora Melinda, who joins us live from World Headquarters in New York.
Hey, so a lot of activities that we've been seeing in the market today, but let's take a look at some of the earnings that we got in the after-hours trade. I've got my eyes on shares of Ulta. We're seeing them pushing higher here. This is after some robust demand that we did see. When you think about the health of the consumer more broadly, you've been seeing a little bit of a mixed perspective here. But in terms of Ulta, we're seeing a lot of people spending money on cosmetics, hair products, makeup, and that's really boosting sales over at the company here. So you are seeing the street celebrating with shares up about 5.5% right now in the after-hours trade. But switching gears from what's going on in cosmetics over into the land of tech, I'm looking at HPE. That's Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. We're seeing shares lower right now in the post-market, down about 7% nearly. And this is after its sales outlook disappointed investors. It missed expectations for the current quarter. There's a lot of concerns right now being underscored about it not meeting the high expectations as it relates to its AI servers here. So you are seeing this really taking a beating just a tad here as we continue to look on the sector right now more broadly. But let's take a look about the big picture right now that happened during the trading day. Let's take a look at how major indexes closed. So we did see the S&P 500 ending just above, a little bit higher, about 0.1% higher. The NASDAQ 100 down about 0.1%. And then we also are seeing the Dow Jones Industrial just about unchanged, about 0.1% lower here. But we are really just parsing earnings, continued focus right now, especially as we're looking at the Fed coming next week.
All right, Nora, thank you so much as ever. Bloomberg's Nora Melinda with Power Moves live from New York. Coming up, we'll have the latest battle between congressional Republicans, this time between New York's Elise Stefanik and the Speaker of the House. We'll bring you those details and discuss the latest White House ballroom shakeup with our political panel. They're in next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I can tell you what comes next. There'll be an awful lot of unhappy people, disappointed people who will wonder why the Republicans let them down. Here's a situation where a dozen Republicans can make a difference in the lives of millions of Americans, extending a law which was on the books for a long period of time. Do we need to do other things in health care? You bet. Sign me up. Let's do it. But for the time being, let's take care of this emergency situation created by the Republicans and their big, beautiful budget bill.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Amara Omokwe. I'm Joe Matthew. That, of course, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. He joined us last evening responding to the latest health care standoff on Capitol Hill and some of the ideas that have been floated. A group now of moderate House Republicans have joined several Democratic colleagues to support a compromise plan to renew expiring Obamacare subsidies. The proposal faces an uphill climb, though, as Republican congressional leaders dig in on opposition to renewing tax credits set to expire at the end of the year. The president hasn't weighed in yet, and joining us now with their reaction to this story and more, this evening's political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributor, Democratic strategist Adam Hodge is with us, managing director at Bully Pulpit International, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, president CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Great to have you both with us. Sarah, you're the first person who told us about a bill that was sponsored by Representative Kiggins, the Republican on this piece of legislation, together with Representative Gottheimer, the Democrat. This is one attempt, and I know they met with Bill Cassidy, the senator, last evening about maybe a bicameral action. John Thune promised a vote a week from today.
Did.
Might it be a bill that looks like this?
It might very well be a bill like this. There's a lot of support in the House to get ACA fixed. The Republican Main Street Partnership Caucus last week came out with a statement. Like, there's 87 of us. We need this fixed. They're behind her bill. Fitzpatrick also has a bill, but right now I think more of them are behind her bill. They want to fix before they go home in 2 weeks. That is a top priority for the Main Street Republicans.
What does it say to you that some Republicans are willing to join Democrats potentially? Does it say to you that Republicans are really feeling the pressure on this affordability question that has bubbled up in recent weeks?
They are feeling the pressure, but also, they want to do what's right for the American people. You know, they're not the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus is kind of all over, and then they won't vote for it anyway. These men and women came here to make a difference, and we can't just leave ACA hanging out there. I mean, too many people can't afford what their new premiums would be.
So how are you feeling about this as the Democrat on our panel? Adam, when we spoke with Senator Durbin last evening, Democrats were talking about a potential 3-year extension to Obamacare subsidies. In this legislation, we have a 1-year extension and new limits on eligibility. Is it something that Democrats can vote for?
Well, first, Joe, I think I take a step back, and I'm amazed that we're at a point where we have Republicans defending Obamacare. But we will take it and move on, because I think it is making a difference in the lives of millions of Americans. I think the Democrats are trying to find a clean extension, right? They're part of the negotiation around the shutdown was a 1-year clean extension. I think that's the bare minimum the Democrats would go for, and I think there would make openings for some compromises around the margins, but I think the most effective thing, given how close we are to the start of the new year, to when people are going to see their premiums skyrocket, is just a 1-year clean extension. And then you hope to bridge to a more permanent extension down the road. But I think politically, there's no question that Democrats have been able to flip the script. It fits in with the affordability topic that we're all talking about, that the president, despite his claims about it being, a hoax, are dragging down Republican poll numbers around the country. And I think finding a fix is the right thing to do for the American people. And my advice to the Republicans on their politics is to find a way to do it to help stop the free fall in their support.
Adam, how do Democrats strategize around this issue if a 1-year clean extension ultimately doesn't move forward? Obviously, this is going to be an uphill climb. What's the game plan going forward if this doesn't work?
I mean, just the raw politics of it, I think, and you've seen this a little bit, they will hammer Republicans across the country for creating this mess and getting us in the situation. There is a clean extension that would give people the confidence and the comfort that their premiums won't go up. I think if it fails, this will be part of every single political advertisement that you see from Democrats, both who are running against incumbent Republicans and in open seats across the country, to really drive home this wedge, because it does fit very neatly into this affordability issue. If your eggs are more expensive, if your beef is more expensive, if your burgers at 4th of July are more expensive, and you can't afford your health care, that is a terrible political place for Republicans to be in as we get into the busy season of the campaigns for the midterms.
Well, this whole health care debate is coming against the backdrop of some discord reportedly within the Republican conference. Look no further than Elise Stefanik holding a series of interviews, going to social media to criticize the leadership style of Speaker Mike Johnson. She told the Wall Street Journal that she cited matters ranging from members criticizing his decision to keep lawmakers at home during the shutdown, to weak showings in special elections, to what she cast as his failure to address the expected jump in health care costs if the party doesn't reach an agreement on this. Speaker Mike Johnson reacted yesterday. Listen.
All of that is false. I don't exactly know why Elise won't just call me. I texted her yesterday. I sent my friend Elise a text last night, and I said, can you find out what the issue was, and I'll help you resolve it. I support her provision. I mean, I would vote for it. I think it's smart. And I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't included. So I don't know why she's frustrated with me. I literally had nothing to do with it, but I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and help her. I want everybody to be successful, and we're going to try to make the bill as best it can be.
This coming, Sarah, just after Nancy Mace suggested that she might be retiring soon. They're both running for other jobs,
they are.
Though, right?
They both have to be running for governor of their states.
Gubernatorial campaigns, or is there true discord of the family?
So there's a couple things going on here. Nancy Mace, I'm not really sure, just for full disclosure.
Fine.
I do know she's running
Maybe we shouldn't conflate them.
Right. She's running for South Carolina governor. She's been all over the place. Elise Stefanik, running for governor of New York, she has a personal... it's personal with the speaker. You know, she was selected to be the ambassador to the UN.
Right.
That fell through because the speaker was concerned about having such a small margin. So she's disappointed by that. She didn't get her leadership position back because that had already been previously filled by another Main Street member, Lisa McClain. Yeah. So she's kind of a little bit, but, you know, Elise does have some points. Sure. For full disclosure, I'm very good friends with her. She's a member of Main Street. She's a great person. She airs her frustrations. Maybe she should have kept it behind closed doors, but, you know, she's not wrong on some of it. And she did get the issue fixed. Yeah. So you have to, she did get
with
a
that
victory
provision
in the
NDA.
She got the provision back, which is what she wanted.
Joe, I'll just say,
we're peace from here, I'm sure.
The Democrats
yes, it's be peace forever here.
We reach you, Adam Hodge. Grab the slushie. Adam Hodge and Sarah Chamberlain, our great panel. Thank you so much. Much more ahead as we turn to the Fed next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Amara Omokwe, I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for spending some time with us on this Thursday. We'll have more coming up on the president's looming selection for a new Fed chief. But first, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. A Virginia man has been charged with placing pipe bombs outside the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters here in Washington on the eve of the January 6th riot, ending a 5-year investigation. Brian Cole Jr. of Woodbridge, Virginia, is charged with transporting explosive devices and attempting malicious destruction after being arrested earlier today by the FBI. U.S. Attorney for D.C., Judge Janine, took part in a briefing earlier today. Judge Pirro.
This case involved millions of pieces of data. And it is a huge win because it was like finding a needle in a haystack. So much of this evidence was very specific, but a lot of it was also very general.
And the FIFA World Cup draw tomorrow in Washington, D.C. is adding Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sahm to the star-studded list of attendees. Both leaders have confirmed that they will hold a short meeting with President Trump during the event, with the president saying that he is willing to talk trade during these conversations. Sahm said she's planning to address auto, steel, and aluminum during her first ever meeting with the president. Carney and Sahm will also meet with each other in anticipation of next year's review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. And President Trump earlier this week continued to tease Kevin Hasset as a potential Fed chair. Take a listen.
I want to thank you all for being here. It's a great group. And I guess a potential Fed chair is here, too. I don't know. Are we allowed to say that? Potential. He's a respected person, that I can tell you.
Bloomberg News reporting last week showed that National Economic Council Director Kevin Hasset is seen as the frontrunner for the Fed job. While President Trump says he will not make that announcement until next year, markets are currently looking ahead to next week's FOMC meeting, where it's expected that interest rates will be cut for a third straight time. Joining us now with the latest here in Washington is Bloomberg's Enda Curran. Enda, good to see you. So markets are fully pricing in another rate cut next week, but that doesn't mean that this meeting is going to be uneventful. What can you tell us about what to expect? It's expected to be a pretty close decision, Amara, as you well know. We have people on the policy committee who are more worried about inflation, some people on that committee who are more worried about the state of the labour market. It will depend just how deep that division is in terms of what final decision does come out of it. If they do cut next week, for example, they may perhaps suggest they won't be cutting in the months forward. So there's a lot to come out of in terms of the details beyond whether or not they do cut.
We've been talking a lot about affordability and rising prices recently, but is it not the job market that the Fed is more concerned about?
Well, there are those on the committee, as I say, who are more worried about where inflation's at. We get PCE tomorrow. Core PCE will be very important. That's the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation. That will suggest where things are headed on that side of things. We haven't had official labour data. We have had soft private sector data like the ADP numbers suggesting the labour market is weakening. If that flows through, it will be enough to tip over the doves to win the day in terms of whether to cut or not.
Mm-hmm. Lots of news in recent days about Kevin Hasset emerging as the frontrunner in the Fed chair search. What are we learning about how markets might react if he is indeed the pick? What are you hearing?
Hints of a pushback, I think, Amara. Our own Bloomberg television colleagues interviewing some people overnight from the market side of things, expressing some concern. Other economists also going on the record to say that their worry is he might be seen as too politically aligned with the White House, maybe too politically invested, will not do enough to protect the independence of the Fed. That's the critical concern, and therefore, by extension, the worry is you would make policy error and lose the confidence of markets. Now, to be fair, we're not there yet. Mr. Hasset hasn't been announced. We don't yet know what he said. He has said he would protect Fed independence if he got the job. But right here, right now, there are certainly some concerns among Fed watchers as to whether or not Fed's independence would be protected.
This also reporting of Scott Bessent, if indeed Hasset is tapped, taking his job as the leader of the NEC inside the White House. That would be 3 hats, I believe, that he would be wearing. He's also still acting commissioner of the IRS at this point and speaking on a daily basis in the media defending the president's economic policies. Does he have the bandwidth for all of that?
Well, there obviously are a lot of moving pieces in the economic jigsaw over the White House at the moment. But if Treasury Secretary Bessent did take on that job as well, NEC, IRS, and of course the Treasury, it would surely make him one of the most powerful Treasury Secretaries in recent years. And of course would give him broad oversight on economic policy at a time when the White House is hammering the Fed for not bringing down interest rates quickly enough. So if it makes him more powerful, you would have to say it might put more pressure on the Fed.
Yeah, got it. And great to have you. Bloomberg's Enda Curran with us in Washington. Joining us now with more insights, Claudia Sahm, Chief Economist at New Century Advisors. It's always great to have you, Claudia, on Bloomberg TV and radio, and we welcome you. We'd like to talk about both of these tracks with you, not only what the Fed is doing, but also who might be tapped to replace Jay Powell. And it does seem that Washington has its head around, the market's getting its head around Kevin Hasset. But what about next week's meeting? Is a cut in the bag?
I would say a cut is highly likely, but I also think there's a very high likelihood that they'll be signaling a likelihood that they'll pause after that. They're going to want to see a lot more information. They will have completed 75 basis points of cuts, and we haven't seen any improvement on inflation this year, right? So the reason there's so much disagreement is it's a really tricky situation for the Fed with concerns about the labor market and concerns about inflation at the same time. So I do think they will do another cut, but I think they're going to really tell us, hey, we've taken in the insurance and now we're going to see how this plays out.
Claudia, headed into this Fed meeting, we heard a lot from Fed policymakers, and we saw the growing divisions among them about the outlook for the labor market and inflation. Is a divided Fed going to be the new normal as we head into 2026? And if it is, does that worry you at all?
So the division that we're seeing at the Fed is because the economic picture is really complicated for the Fed, right? Like this very much flows out of a difficult moment where inflation is still closer to 3% than 2%. It's been above the 2% target since 2021. And we have a labor market that is clearly slowing down, but like how worried we should be about this? Is this kind of a normalization, or are we getting ready to go off over a cliff, right? And so I think, the disagreement we see right now, this is very healthy. I think it is notable that the one person out of the 19 that we didn't hear from was Jay Powell, the Fed chair. He was letting everybody speak, so we heard all their views.
Does that strike you as Chair Powell trying to sort of maintain optionality going into this meeting? Or what did you make of the fact that we didn't hear from Chair Powell headed into the blackout period?
So I think this was him being a leader of the Fed and wanting to make sure that all of the voices that were heard, I mean, they have been engineering, rate cuts. This disagreement has been happening, but they have been moving the Fed funds rate lower. And the thing is, if Powell had come out and spoken, we wouldn't have paid attention to the other people, because there is this view, I think it's not a correct view, that the Fed chair is in charge of the Fed. Like this is just all, what the Fed chair wants is what the Fed chair gets. But this was an opportunity for us to really hear what an independent Fed looks and sounds like.
I want to ask you about a point that you've brought up a couple of times here, which is the fact that we've had inflation above the Fed's 2% target for several years now. We heard several policymakers talking about that as we headed into this meeting. At what point does the Fed start to risk its credibility on inflation if we continue to have inflation lingering above target?
Well, I mean, you certainly will hear plenty of commentators say that the Fed has already lost credibility, from inflation, being higher early in the recovery from the pandemic, and then that we still aren't at 2%. What we haven't seen, though, is in terms of like market pricing, inflation compensation, expectation. It looks like we still have, people that are putting money on the line are still with the Fed in that inflation will get back to 2% in the next few years. And households, too, have been largely on board with eventually, the inflation is going to come back down. Now, that's something that the Fed doesn't want to be cavalier about. They don't want to take for granted. And, especially the Reserve Bank presidents that are out in their communities, like they are hearing a lot about affordability concerns. So like the Fed has to take this seriously. They are taking it seriously. But again, it's a tricky situation. People want inflation down, but nobody wants a recession.
Well, as you know, Claudia, it's been a bit of a data desert recently because of the government shutdown. And I wonder if the Fed is leaning harder into privately sourced data, whether it's ADP or something else, and what the side effects of that might be.
Right. So the Fed is data driven, right? They're always going to want more information. Sure. It has been difficult that the government data is delayed, and it's unfortunate they're not going to get the November employment report until after they have to take this vote. So they've been leaning harder on the private sector data, but they've been using those data for some time. These are not new data. So I think it adds some complexity, some uncertainty to their decision. But, that's just, I think it's great. The alternative data, the private sector data can fill in some of the cracks, but we absolutely need high quality quality government statistics in a timely fashion. And we're going to get back there. But that's going to be a much better place for the Fed and for all of us when we have those data as well.
You know, affordability has been the key word around here recently. The President Trump seems to think that it's a new word. In fact, he called it a Democratic hoax. And I just want you to listen to the stylings of the president on this issue that, in fact, got him elected to begin with. Listen.
My administration and our partners in Congress will continue our work to lower the cost of living and make America affordable again. Affordability, they call it, was a con job by the Democrats. We did a great job on groceries and affordability. The only problem is the fake news. There's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. My administration has taken historic action to lower costs for American consumers. Just about everything is down. You know, this whole thing is, they use the word affordability. It's a Democrat hoax. I think affordability is the greatest kind of...
So let's ask Claudia Sahm, is affordability a Democrat hoax?
No, affordability is not a hoax. Now, I will give the president, there's more to unpack here. Like, affordability is not just about a price tag. Affordability is not just about your paycheck. I do think this is something bigger in terms of, you know, we've just in the last 5 years been on a real roller coaster. And so even if people look better on paper in terms of their wages are higher, they're handling these higher costs, there's a lot, people are unsettled. There's been a lot of uncertainty. This has been very traumatic. So it's not a hoax. This is a real issue. We do have to be mindful of any kind of policies that are pushing more costs into the system, like tariffs, that, you know, can potentially push up prices. And keeping the labor market firing on all cylinders is incredibly important for Americans. So I think this is a tough nut to crack. And I do worry that there will be some attempts to do really easy policy fixes, like jam down interest rates really rapidly or send out checks that aren't really going to solve the problem. And there is a real problem here.
Claudia, I want to turn and ask you a little bit about the Fed chair search. We here at Bloomberg are reporting that Kevin Hasset is now the front runner in that search. The next Fed chair will have to balance the president's desire for drastically lower interest rates, as you just mentioned there, with maintaining credibility in the markets, maintaining credibility on Fed independence. Does Kevin Hasset strike you as someone who can strike that balance, that very difficult balance?
Kevin Hasset absolutely can strike this balance. So he began his career as a Fed economist. So he understands the institution, the way it works. He knows that, you know, we talk about the Fed being data-driven. That's because those data, they come into the discussions, the debates that are had around the table. It takes 7 people to vote for a rate cut. So he is one vote of 7 that can get a rate cut across the line. And so he has the skills. He understands the institution. But it is a question, and unfortunately it's a question that's kind of been forced on him because of the way this whole process is run out, is which Kevin Hasset shows up. Is it the skilled independent economist, or is it someone that's, you know, part of Trump's political apparatus? That's what he is right now. That's his job right now. As Fed chair, he has to set that aside and become nonpartisan and data-driven.
It's always great to spend some time with you, Claudia. Thank you for the insights. Claudia Sahm, Chief Economist, New Century Advisors. We thank you. Coming up, President Trump announcing his plan to deploy federal immigration officers to target specifically Somali migrants in the Twin Cities. We'll speak with the mayor of one of those cities next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The last thing that we need is federal agents coming here, pretending that we should be afraid of somebody just based on the color of their skin, just based on what they look like. The last thing that we need is federal agents coming to town attempting to turn us against each other, to turn us against ourselves. The last thing we need is federal agents coming in town to create chaos.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Amara Omokwe. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. That was the mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter, responding just a couple of days ago to comments from President Trump this week in which he announced that He's planning to send immigration officers to the Twin Cities in an effort to target specifically Somali migrants. Joining us now live with his response to the president is Mayor Carter. Mr. Mayor, welcome to Bloomberg TV and radio. We've got a lot of questions for you, but I'd like to start just with a status update. What is the level of anxiety on the ground in your city, and have you seen any federal agents yet?
Thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for the question. That's so critical. The anxiety level is high. The anxiety level is high in our community. Fear is high in our community because of our federal government's what they call, at least, their public safety strategy. One of the things that I shared in that speech is we sure need public safety strategies that reduce fear, that bring stability, that make people feel more safe. What they're talking about and what they're doing is doing the complete opposite. It's got folks, struggling to make sure they keep their paperwork, their citizenship papers, their immigration papers with them, and it's just a scary time right now.
Well, I mentioned the words of President Trump. We heard your response, but I want to bring people back to the White House for some offhand remarks that he made the other day. Yeah. And it's not the first time that we've heard him attack Somali migrants, to begin with, including Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Somalia. Listen to President Trump and the way that he framed this community.
We're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
Boy, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure I'll get a lot of tweets about this, but I'm just trying to figure out how we're having this kind of language in the public square in 2025. What role do Somalian migrants bring to your community? Tell us what we should know about them.
Well, first of all, we know that we have a president who holds on to his space at the center of the public square just by coming up with the most despicable thing he can possibly say and say it out loud, and to try to make sure that everybody's arguing over what he said. That's disgusting. Second of all, as he talks about Somali Americans, their country is America. They are Somali Americans. And that's one of the challenges that they're going to have, is that they're going to find that the vast majority of Somali Americans in St. Paul and in Minneapolis and in Minnesota are citizens of the United States, a very large number of them who were born in the United States. And so, when he says their country, he's talking about the United States of America. He's talking about this country right here. He's talking about, teachers. He's talking about religious leaders. He's talking about entrepreneurs and business leaders, people who are pushing to achieve the American dream. When I grew up in school, just like many of us, that was a point of pride for America, that this was a place that people could look to from other places and from across oceans and say, I want to come here and pursue my dreams. It seems as those waves of immigrants have shifted from primarily being in Europe to being in Asia and Africa, our position on that has fundamentally shifted. But make no mistake about it, to hear a United States president saying he doesn't want Americans in America is a statement of incompetence. And I agree with him. He's incompetent to do the job.
Mr. Mayor, one of the reasons that the Somali American community there has caught the attention of President Trump is because of this issue with fraud in the Minnesota social services system. I wonder, what is your response to the president and others using that fraud issue to kind of lob broader criticisms at the Somali American community?
Yeah, we have I think, the largest Somali population outside of Somalia. We have an enormous Somali population. Like I said, people running stores and people who are students in our schools and educators and things like that. It is true that a very, very small number, comparative to the size of our Somali community, a very, very small number of people in our Somali community have been found guilty of committing fraud. Now, I'll tell you, if the president's mad about that, wait till he finds out how many white people commit fraud in America and how much fraud white people have been accountable for in this country as well. But we all know that to take the actions of a handful of people and By the way, that includes the mastermind of that major scandal. It's called our Feeding Our Future scandal, who was a white woman, not even a Somali person. But we all know to take the actions of one person or the actions of a few people and impute them across an entire group, that, it's been asked and answered for a very long time. That's not what we ought to do. It doesn't make logical sense, and it certainly doesn't make human sense. And what we see on TV is an individual who seems to be aggressively losing his grasp on reality, someone who clearly has never been to a mosque or never been to a Somali mall in Minnesota or in Minneapolis, giving his opinion, which is unneeded by anyone here and really by anyone in the country.
Mayor Carter, have you heard from the administration on this? Have you been contacted by ICE? Or are you hearing about this in the media like everybody else?
We're hearing about it in the media. They don't, and they know that we despise their approaches. We have said loud and clear, we need public safety strategies that make us safer. We see ICE agents just sort of show up, and we track them on, social media, and we track them through the media. We track them through the rumors that we hear. Our police officers and folks kind of see them in community, or our rec leaders might see them in community and flag something for us. We're a community that, and it's really clear that we don't need them. We're a community that we solve 90 to 100% of homicides in this city. We've got gun violence down 70%. We've tripled our case clearance rate for non-fatal shootings. Nobody holds lawbreakers accountable better than our local police officers do here. So we don't need their help keeping us safe, and we don't need them. We absolutely don't need them parachuting in. They came in a couple weeks ago and arrested, set up a raid at a manufacturing facility, arrested 14 people, released a statement a couple of days later to say that one of those 14 people had some previous charges, not a conviction, that one of those 14 people that they created this big, huge carnival over had some previous charge. So that sounds to me like every single one of them were people who have never been convicted of a crime who were just trying to go to work that morning. So we don't need their help. We don't need their brand of public safety. And they've heard me say that so many times. They don't seek to come and coordinate with us or work with us on any of those types of things. They come in and set up chaotic moments that we end up having to deal with. And we're tired of it.
Mayor, stay in touch with us as this gets better, or bigger, I should say. I appreciate it, and I hope it does get better for St. Paul. The mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter, thanks for being with us here on Bloomberg.
Thanks for having me on.
On a lighter note, happening right here, right now in Washington, D.C., is the annual lighting of the National Christmas Tree. If we can show you, if you're with us here on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, a live view from outside the White House. That's on the ellipse just across the way, Amara. That might be the coldest night I ever had on pool duty at the White House, and I almost missed the motorcade home. But the president will soon be there, and it is kind of nice to see the tree lighting.
I love Christmas. I love the tree
lighting. Yeah, you're feeling this?
It's my favorite time of the year.
It's getting a little cold out now, but
that's okay.
We're ready for it, right? We had, of course, the congressional Christmas tree lit a couple days ago. Then it was the Pentagon. Now this is the big one. If you've ever been to Washington, the ellipse right across from the White House, on the way to the mall, soon to be lit with a big ceremony and concert that'll be happening shortly, about 5 minutes from now. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter. You got a lot to catch up on. You can find it on the terminal and online. And following that briefing today on Capitol Hill, you'll have a lot to learn. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Alongside Amara Amokwe, I'm Joe Matthew. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio.